Amelia was the kind of person who always knew what to say, even when words weren't needed. She held the weight of the world on her shoulders with quiet grace, keeping everything in order while the seasons passed gently through their family home. That house, nestled at the end of Willow Lane, had been their haven for years, a place where tea always brewed on the stove, and the walls carried laughter like echoes of something sacred. To the outside world, the three sisters seemed inseparable, each one different yet part of the same unbreakable thread. Clara, the middle sister, had a spirit that could not be contained. She felt things deeply, loved openly, and asked questions that others weren't ready to answer. Her room overflowed with journals and pressed flowers, and she believed that love was the only thing in the world worth writing about. Lena, the youngest, was the observer. She watched everything, understood more than she let on, and kept her thoughts tucked neatly behind quiet smiles. The three of them had built a world around each other, one stitched together with secrets, small joys, and unspoken understanding. But there was something in the air lately, something that lingered when the house went quiet at night. It wasn't spoken aloud, but Clara felt it, in the way Amelia paused at certain questions, in the moments of hesitation that passed like shadows across her face. It wasn't just the weight of being the eldest. It was something else. Clara didn't know what, but she was beginning to sense that their family story wasn't as complete as they'd always believed. It started with a photograph. Clara had been flipping through an old family album when a yellowed snapshot slipped out from between the pages. It was a picture of a young woman who looked so much like their mother, smiling beside a man Clara had never seen before. He wasn't their father. There was tenderness in the way he looked at her, a closeness captured in the stillness of that black and white moment. Clara felt her heart catch, as if she had opened a door she wasn't supposed to find. She showed it to Lena, who studied the photo for a long time without speaking. "Maybe you should ask Amelia," Lena said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Clara knew how that would go. Amelia would change the subject, or brush it off with something that sounded like an answer, but wasn't. She always did when the past came too close. Still, curiosity settled into Clara's chest like a stone. She found herself wondering about their mother in ways she never had before. Who had she been before she became mom? Who was that man? And why had he been hidden in the pages of their history? The questions only grew louder. That night, as Clara stood by the attic stairs, she looked up into the dark and knew something was waiting there. Something more than just dust and old boxes. Something about love and loss and everything their mother had never said. The box was older than Clara expected, wrapped in a faded scarf that smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. Inside were letters, neatly tied with ribbon, dated before any of the sisters were born. The handwriting was delicate, flowing, and unmistakably their mother's. Each envelope bore the name Elias, not their father. Clara's hands trembled as she opened the first one. The words were soft and full of longing, written to someone who clearly had once meant everything to her. Their mother had loved deeply, before the life they all knew had begun. The letters painted a picture of a woman young and fearless, caught up in a love that felt like destiny. Elias was kind, poetic, and endlessly patient. He wrote of promises, of a life they would build, of stars they'd named together. And then, without explanation, the tone shifted. Later letters were scattered with regret, hesitations, unanswered questions. The final note ended with, "Maybe in another life we would have been enough." Clara didn't know how to carry it. Her heart was torn between betrayal and wonder. This was not a story they had ever been told. Why had it been hidden? What happened to Elias? Why had their mother married someone else if her heart still belonged to another? She had to know more. She confronted Amelia the next morning, placing one letter gently on the table between them. Amelia's expression froze. She didn't touch the letter. "You shouldn't have gone through that," she said, her voice cold but shaken. "It's not your place." "I just want to understand," Clara replied. "Did she love him more than Dad? Did she ever love Dad at all?" Amelia didn't answer. Instead, she walked away, leaving the letter untouched. Her silence spoke more than words ever could. Clara's heart ached with the weight of it. She wasn't trying to stir pain, only to uncover a truth she felt they all deserved. Lena found Clara sitting in the garden later that day. She sat beside her, without asking questions. After a while, she said softly, "Maybe Mom didn't want us to see her as someone who made mistakes. Maybe she thought hiding it would protect us." Clara looked at her. "But love isn't a mistake." "No," Lena said, "but maybe the choices around it can be." That night, Clara thought about her own heart, about Leo, the boy with the crooked smile and kind eyes, someone she had loved quietly without ever telling her sisters. She'd always assumed Amelia wouldn't approve. Now she wondered if Amelia's disapproval came from something buried in the past, a fear passed down like a warning. She pressed her hand over the letters, then over her own chest. There was love in this family, deep and real, but there were also ghosts, memories tucked into boxes and never spoken of. Clara didn't want to live in silence. She wanted to love loudly, truthfully, without hiding. And maybe, just maybe, that was how healing would begin. Clara waited until the house was quiet before telling Lena about Leo. There was no more space for secrets, not after the letters. She spoke simply without dressing it up. He made her feel seen, safe, and real. Lena didn't judge. She listened, then said, "You should tell Amelia. Hiding it will only hurt more." Clara nodded, knowing she was right, but still afraid. When she finally did, Amelia's reaction was instant. "You don't know him well enough," she said sharply. "You're rushing into something you'll regret." Clara stood her ground. "I do know him. I trust him." But Amelia's eyes flashed, the same pain she'd carried since Clara showed her the letters. Love like that doesn't end in fairy tales. It ends in silence, in walking away. "I've seen it." Clara didn't respond. She finally understood. Amelia wasn't protecting her. She was projecting her own fear. The fear of watching someone fall in love with a promise that wouldn't last. Clara wasn't their mother, and Leo wasn't Elias, but Amelia couldn't separate the past from the present. Later, Lena found Amelia alone, staring out the window. "You still think about him, don't you?" she asked gently. Amelia didn't deny it. "I was 13 when Mom told me. She said, she made me promise not to tell anyone. Said some loves aren't meant to be understood, just remembered." Her voice cracked. "I watched her live with that choice. I thought if I could stop you two from making the same mistake, I'd be protecting you." Lena shook her head. "You're not protecting us, Amelia. You're stopping us from living." That night, Clara wrote a letter of her own, not to Leo, but to their mother. She poured every feeling into it, the confusion, the admiration, the pain of not knowing her fully. She ended it with one line, "I want to love with my whole heart, just like you once did." She gave the letter to Amelia without saying a word. Amelia read it slowly, tears pooling in her eyes. For the first time, she didn't speak with control. She just said, "I'm sorry." The walls she had built around herself began to break. "You're right. I've been afraid. I didn't want to watch you lose what you love." Clara took her hand. "But what if I don't lose it? What if I find something worth keeping?" A few days later, Clara introduced Leo to Lena first. He was nervous, polite, genuine. Lena smiled, sensing something honest between them. Clara hadn't been wrong. This wasn't a reckless love. It was quiet and strong. Amelia still needed time, but she no longer shut Clara out. She even asked about Leo, cautiously, like she was learning how to trust again. They were changing, each of them. Unraveling the past had been painful, but it made space for something better. Honesty, forgiveness, and a future that belonged to them, not to fear. Spring came early that year. The house on Willow Lane felt lighter, as if the walls had exhaled after holding their breath for too long. The sisters were speaking more, not just out of habit, but with intention. Truth had reshaped their bond. There were still moments of hesitation, small silences that lingered, but they no longer felt like barriers. They felt like space being made, for growth, for healing, for understanding. Clara and Leo had grown closer, not through grand gestures, but steady presence. He didn't push, didn't demand. He just stayed. With him, Clara felt like herself, unfiltered, unguarded. When Amelia finally agreed to meet him, it wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, cautious, but Leo met her with kindness, and that softened something in her. For the first time, Amelia saw that Clara wasn't chasing an illusion. She was building something real. Amelia found a last letter from Elias tucked behind a loose floorboard in the attic, one their mother never sent. It was short, honest, full of love, but also release. "We loved fiercely," it read, "but love alone isn't always enough. I hope you find peace. I hope you build something beautiful." It didn't speak of regret, only acceptance. Amelia held it for a long time before giving it to Clara. She said nothing as she handed it over, but Clara understood. Some stories end quietly so others can begin. Lena suggested they do something to mark the change, not just for themselves, but for the memory of their mother, the parts of her they never knew and the ones they were just starting to understand. Together, they decided to create a time capsule. They each wrote a letter. Clara's was to her future self. Lena's was about the beauty of honesty. Amelia's was a letter of forgiveness, not to anyone else, but to herself. They buried it near the rose bush their mother had planted when they were children. It had bloomed again this year, brighter than any season before. Over the capsule, they planted a new rose, a different color, a sign of renewal. They didn't need to say anything. The act spoke louder than words. Weeks later, Clara stood beside Leo under the early evening sky. She didn't need to wonder if this would last. She didn't need promises wrapped in forever. She only needed presence, and she had it. They didn't talk about the past, but he knew it mattered. He respected the weight of her history without trying to fix it. That, more than anything, made her sure. Amelia smiled more, not constantly, but with ease. She no longer held herself back from joy. Lena, always quiet, started writing again, stories this time, not just reflections. Their home remained the same, but the energy within it had shifted. Love had shown up in many forms, hidden, lost, rediscovered. What mattered was that it stayed. Not because it was perfect, but because they chose to keep it. That was the truth they now lived by. Love, when true, makes room for everything else to grow.